I'm Catherine Lambrecht. I'm with the, I do programs for the Highland Park Historical Society. Welcome this evening to our program, Ravinia Music Under the Stars and Around the World. An archives access project courtesy of the Illinois Secretary of State, which I'm sure Nancy's going to likely explain. Nancy is the archivist of the Highland Park Archives and Local History Collections at the library, which was donated from the Historical Society to the city. It's housed at the library. Nancy's the archivist, and the Historical Society sort of oversees the project in general. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy, who will then introduce Steve Gianni, who's the project archivist for the Ravinia Park collections. Turn it over to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Catherine. And first, I want to welcome everyone here. Thank you for coming. And yes, this project is under a broad spectrum. It represents multiple collections in multiple places. The nucleus of the collection came from the Historical Society's collecting efforts in the 60s and 90s with a retired manager, a widow of a retired manager from Highland Park, Ravinia, and Mr. Freeling. And it is now housed at the library, but it also included the unprocessed, by unprocessed as archives uncatalogued materials at Ravinia, and that was Steve's Guillaume's job to do. We worked with the CSO, we worked with the Newberry, and to bring together groups of items to digitize, to make available with the funding from the Illinois Secretary of State. So Jesse White serves also as the state librarian, state archivist, and we get the funding to digitize these collections and other collections that we have in Highland Park comes from the state, and we're grateful for their ongoing support. I know I am. So in a sense, so I work for both the society and the library, and but this was strictly, these monies go to public libraries. So the funding went to the library and we shared it with Ravinia. And the Historical Society shared all the work they'd done over the years, putting things together. And that's all about Under the Stars. Couldn't find a really good picture of stars in our collection, but this is a lovely picture by local photography Jessie Lowe Smith taken in May of 1910 of shooting stars in Northwood Highland Park. Beautiful flowers for the landscape that people embraced so much as they settled here. And I remember, we want to remember first, before Highland Park, before Illinois, there were people that lived here, Native Americans. And this part of the country, Ravinia, Highland Park, was not part of the United States until the three tribes, the Chippewas, Ottawas, and Potawatomi Indians ceded it to the United States. And I'm sharing this treaty image for a couple reasons. It's very important, the steps that we took to become where we are today, but because it's from the treaty collection at the National Archives, and it is the National Archives granting arm, the NHPRC, that made the archives program possible in Highland Park. And we are pretty sure they're going to help us develop the Ravinia Archives program. And so again, with great support from national level and state level. And this is other things they do too, sharing information with people. So after 1833, we have Deerfield Township. And I'm not gonna talk, this is not linear, and I'm not gonna talk a lot about archivy, but I'm gonna bring in some little points that are helpful for people, the researchers out there, and for people that don't know Ravinia history. I know many of you do. So Deerfield Township was renamed Moraine Township in the end of the 20th century. And sometimes it's kind of confusing because we have Deerfield, the city, we have Deerfield Township, which doesn't exist anymore, but everything's labeled Deerfield. We have Deerfield High School. But if you look at the map, you can see we have Highland Park, we have Ravinia, and this is from the 1840s. And Ravinia did not join or next to Highland Park until 1899. And if you look closely down the bottom, you can see the Daggett farm. And Daggett was an English immigrant, and it was he sold land to the railroad, and he sold land to Ravinia for Ravinia to develop that. And we're going to jump forward to 1909, and I wanted to show the whole map here. So at the very bottom, there's Ravinia Park over the tracks. Now, Mr. Daggett still has a little bit of farm surrounding Ravinia, but not for much longer. And so Ravinia Park is established, and by this point, this is all part of Highland Park. So we have two railroads, as you may know, coming through. And we have the kind of the tracks that are now that are Metra, that were steam engines, Chicago Northwest. And we have kind of what was the upstart Chicago-Milwaukee Railroad. And this is a 1906 map of the railroad that stops in Ravinia. And it is the Chicago and Milwaukee Railroad that purchases the land in Ravinia, now Highland Park, to create an amusement place. And what they're doing, of course, is building traffic for their people to buy tickets. And they're competing, of course, with the steam engines. And this is, in fact, from a railroad, Chicago North. It later became the North Shore. For those of you who are familiar with the Electric Railroad, it was called the Chicago-Milwaukee. And eventually, in its last days in '63, it was the North Shore. And this is from a railroad periodical showing what they have at Ravinia, the places you can go. And it was framed in the Ravinia room. And there's, there was music, there's a casino, there's a theater, there's baseball, lots of things. They're saying people get on the railroad, come and join us. So then they have a park. So for 2 years they're building the park. And we know from this affiche, this poster, they did not intend to name it Ravinia. They were looking for another name. And O.P. Sison, as far as I can tell, was very short-lived at Ravinia. I think if I track the right person, he's Oscar. He was a director and producer. And so this contest really didn't go anywhere. And Mr. Sison didn't stay. From what I can tell, he died in the Elgin Insane Asylum in 2007. But the contest did not change. They decided to keep the lovely name of Ravinia and develop a park, which was they really wanted people to come. I went too far. So they opened in 1904. And this is the beginning of music and entertainment. And you notice at the time, Highland Park was dry. So when Prohibition changed, it didn't change that much, but they emphasized entertainment, vaudeville, high class society, and come and drink, not drinks, but soda, and watch baseball on the train. And I have a review here from the Chicago Tribune from the day it opened. And it says it was well received. And this, I also want to share this letter. This is not from the Ravinia collection. This is from the city records of Highland Park. So Mr. Frost, whose idea this was, and president of the railroad company, invited the luminaries of Highland Park to come, the fire marshal, the city council, and come to this wonderful event of opening Ravinia. So they came, and the Tribune said, Ravinia Park, the new North Shore amusement resort just completed for the Chicago-Milwaukee Electric Railway, was opened last night with a presentation of Vivian Pappas by Blanche Ring. And if you're interested in that play, it is available on Google Books Internet Archive. And it tells the play was given the Park Theater, a large number, and the park occupies 40 acres of land just south of Highland Park. Its principal buildings are theater, seating 1,010 persons, a casino, a stadium, where athletic presents and vaudeville programs will be given daily. Box holders at the theater last night were Mr. and Mrs. W.A. Alexander, one of the Exmoor founders of Highland Park, Colonel S.R. Whitehall of Fort Sheridan, Gardner Van Ness of Chicago, and F.W. Cushing of Highland Park. So of course, Highland Park was not yet part of Chicago as geographic boundaries change, as we all know. And so there we have the city and the park working together. And this lovely box is part of our collection. It's from the teens, and it's the ticket box. And we know it's from the teens because it says Bennett Griffin manager, and he was manager of the teens in the heyday and the time when Ravinia was all about opera stars. And this box is in our collection too, and is photographed and on the Illinois Digital Archive. The Illinois Digital Archive is actually a product of many states and many organizations working together. And everything on these images, I'm just going to switch quickly so you can see, goes on the Digital Library of America and be searched and can be found, so people can use all these things from our collections. And so that is why they have that. And I'm going to lose that tab now. So we have an engaging park starting off, and people coming, and they're really saying people come and have a leisure time in Highland Park. And this is along the track. These are Illinois roses, again, from our photographic collection. And Ravinia Park, in addition to offering music and opera and bringing all kinds of groups of people in, is offering leisure and amusements. And people come in on the train, and there's some shows the tracks. And I like to show those because we have these glass slides from the Electric Railroad, which are very interesting and show us how the railroad developed and went through Highland Park. And if you are not aware, it is now the bike path. And this picture is from 1924. So many people came to use the park, the high schools, the baseball teams. And this is a picture of high school students from Highland Park High School. And I'm not sure if they're doing a tennis play. On the back of the photo, it says tennis anyone, or if they're playing tennis. But you might recognize some names here. Jay Bornick was a World War I veteran from Highland Park who perished in the war. Queenie Spencer was the brother-in-law of King Edward's wife, Lady Wallace, something like that. And so she was here visiting Highland Park. And William Krieger was a young man who was also in World War I. And we have some of his letters in our collection saying, "I'm damn glad to be alive and happy to survive the war." And there he is. And so there were lots of plays. Ravinia allowed itself to be used for many groups of people, as well as baseball. And if you noticed in that earlier announcement, it said a game with the baseball Browns. Now, we don't have any pictures of the Browns, unfortunately. There we go. So these are the Highland Park Crescents. They played frequently at Ravinia Park. And if you're interested, they're semi-pro. And before they were existence before Ravinia Park, and they were existence after. And the Park District of Highland Park was founded in 1909. So the Ravinia, the baseball park really gave folks and these groups of young athletes a place to play. And play they did, and in the baseball stadium. Now, also, as I mentioned, the Ravinia to this day, it serves as a graduation place and for other entertainments during the years. And we're going to digress a little bit again into names. Now, you'll see it says A Night Off by DSHS Alumni Association at the Ravinia Theater, April 28th, 1916. The high school, may know as Highland Park High School, was originally named Highland Park High School. In 1890, it changed its name to Deerfield High School, and to recognize that it was encompassing this whole township. In 1904, it changed its name to Deerfield Shields because it included so many students from Shields Township north of Highland Park. And until 1936, when they separated again, in 1950, when there's a new Deerfield High School, it stayed these various names until it reclaimed its name in 1936 of Highland Park High School. And the now extant Deerfield High School is part of the same district, but not the same school. So when people are researching, we always have to kind of clarify it. And when you're looking through things, it's helpful to know when you see Deerfield, you see Deerfield Shields, that they are in fact talking about Highland Park. And this is one of, this is not actually from our collection. I just wanted to share it, but it is online and with our other archivist colleagues from the Chicago History Museum. This is Albert Corey. In 1906, the second Chicago Marathon started, and it's continued for several years. It would start in Ravinia Park and would go to Grant Park. And it was funded and supported by Illinois Athletic Association, which no longer exists. But Mr. Corey was a Frenchman. He should have won the gold medal in the 1904 Olympics because the gold medal winner took strychnine and cheated. But this is Mr. Corey at the marathon getting ready to run from Ravinia Park to Grant Park. Is another one of the community events that were held here in that Ravinia. So they really, it became part of a community part of Highland Park. So most famously, we talk about opera. The golden age of opera took place in Highland Park. The Ravinia changed names, like many institutions, several times. And by the 19-teens, it was a group called the Ravinia Company, and they really emphasized opera. They had Aida, and from 1918, actually even earlier, till 1931, really a stable of opera players. They often stayed at the local hotel, Moraine. I have pictures, I don't want too many pictures from not from Ravinia, but there's pictures of the opera singers in the parades. And we have pictures, and this is one of the pictures in our collection that was digitized. It's, I don't know who Enzo Pichetti is. It's a big family name in Highland Park, but he donated these autographed pictures he collected from opera stars in Highland Park. And this is Florence Macbeth, one of the last years before the Depression. And she sang many, many years, a famous American opera singer. and in operas and in Ravinia, and that's and I've had several people do research. We answered several questions of people like, when did she sing? What did she sing in Ravinia? So we're happy to have that online on the Illinois Digital Archive. And it wouldn't be complete. So for those of you who are not aware, Orson Welles lived in Highland Park as a teenager. And when he was just 13 years old, he was writing a column in the Highland Park News, reviewing the opera. And he was 13, 13-year-olds can be kind of grandiose, and he's Orson Welles, and he was very critical, but it's fun. Someone had taped this review on top of this 1928 Ravinia program. And he, all through 1928, he was reviewing. And just to show you online, and with the pandemic, it slowed things down a little bit. And the fact that we were so fluid in bringing people together for our collection. So the state's a little behind too on things, but if you go to the Illinois Digital Archive and page down, you can look and you can search all these programs from these opera years. And people love the ads, the Nash. One of the most time-intensive processes in a digital project with text is what's called optical character recognition, because after the image or the item is captured, you have a picture. And then if there's text in it, you convert it through this process, which has really improved over the decades. And then you have the text, which is within the document. However, it's not always accurate, and especially when there's different fonts and columns. So that's one of the more time-consuming things that we do. And in our previous grant, someone else was doing it, most of it. During the pandemic, I think that's what I spent the bulk of my time do, was verifying to make sure that things read correctly. And you can see one of the major ads I see year after year in the Ravinia ads is something called the Hamilton Institute, where they trained businessmen. So you see the name Hoover hires root beer, but that's not the program. But people really, everyone seems to truly enjoy looking at these old ads, and myself included. Safety razors, ads for the time, the home, and what operas are playing. And you'll see really many. It just so happens, paging down, that this is the Maroof, the opera, is not the man who wrote this, and I'm familiar with this, Maroof. He collaborated with I just by chance, and he collaborated with the Nazis in France. In Paris, he taught at the Paris Conservatory, and there we go. You see Maroof, by Radnud, the French composer, and during World War II, he didn't even wait for the Nazis to declare the French Republic over in the French state. He went straight to the SS and gave him a list of all his Jewish students and Jewish musicians. So I don't think we see him played too much anymore, with very good reason, but it was quite a popular opera at the time and played several summers. Generally, most of the operas, and you'll recognize the First Bank logo. Generally, you see a lot of operas that we know, the standards, because they wanted to bring people in. You see Aida and Carmen, Cinderella, Romeo and Juliet. But sometimes I didn't recognize them, so I looked them up, and that was something I could indulge in and during the pandemic. And one of the favorite pieces that was almost every year seemed to be played, and it was called Martha by Floto, a composer, opera that's been not played a lot recently, but I did listen to it. As a great opera. It's Martha's secret, and her secret is that she smokes, and the last scene, and it's on YouTube as well, and you can see she's smoking with her husband, because he discovers her secret that she smokes when they smoke together. I always thought that was quite amusing. And yes, I quit, if you're gonna ask, a long time ago. So opera, the golden age, and that didn't end completely with the Depression and the end of the Ravinia Company, but it was never an emphasis again. But we do have these wonderful programs, and dance always played an important part of Ravinia, as you can see, and it's through the ages. This is Ruth Page, a very famous modern dancer. Ruth St. Denis was often, and of course often, dance is combined with opera and music and otherwise. In the 1960s, the New York City Ballet came here. We have a picture, and I haven't got clearance from them because it's past post 64 to put it up, but we'd love to, and hopefully we will soon. As you know, also know that Tall Chief, Miss Tall Chief, a Native American dancer, lived in Highland Park. So we have these wonderful programs, Ravinia Park Engagement, Miss Ruth Dennis. A lot of people, some Russian refugees came and dancing. They had children dancing, many programs featuring dance. It was a big part of Ravinia Park. And of course, music. Music is the linchpin of all this, I think, I hope. And then you see dance and music combined with the Chicago Symphony. And you see Ravinia Club, Ravinia Company, they were really the nucleus behind Ravinia. And you will find online here with Ravinia, there's many histories, many timelines that we are putting up there for your research, so you can learn all about what happened, what dates, many histories written that have shared and people have allowed us to print. Now, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra has been playing Ravinia many years since the beginning, but also in the early years, New York Symphony was here. Minneapolis Symphony was the resident orchestra one summer. And you can see all the people that all these years supported Ravinia as it changed hands and developed. And it changed hands several times, as I mentioned. The Ravinia Company was found by residents of North Shore after it went into receivership. And when Ravinia came back after the Depression, and this is before, one thing, education is a big thing. They have the Steans Institute, which Steve is going to tell us about, and it's very interesting, much more interesting and fascinating than this, but they had these children's concerts, and the kids came free. There was a committee, they planned it every year. They played Eric Lura, what's his name? I can't remember. The assistant conductor of the Chicago Symphony conducted the Civic, and they had, they said America's melting pot. No, you have to think this in perspective. This is the early 20th century, and melting pot, they mean Italian, French, Alsatian. But you see a lot of standards, and the kids would have contests and name that tune, the basics you might hear a youth orchestra play today. And that continues today in a different way, though, with the Steans Music Institute teaching children and master classes. I'm gonna go back the other way. And one, I don't know who put this together, but thank you to whomever did. This resume of the Ravinia Festival, and it's seasons 36 to 54, and in it, and again, it's online on the Illinois Digital Archive and will be on the Digital Library of America. It lists every composer by date, by composer, by artist, which is very handy to have. And you'll see, if you click on, you see lots of names. You see opera singers coming back from the early 20th century. Armand Tokachin, you see Lucrezia Borri, who were seen frequently in the early years. One thing, and you can search it, and if you're searching the IDA, you can search it, you can come up and find out if you're looking when was this played, and we do get frequent questions in the archives for that. One tricky thing, again, with names, the transliterations of the Russian composers like Shostakovich and Tchaikovsky are transliterated in the old way. So you have to be aware of that, as probably most musicologists and music researchers are aware. And you see the great Misha Mishakov played at Ravinia in the early years. He was eventually became concertmaster of Detroit Symphony. And I remember from my youth, he carried his violins around in bags for his best students to try out. Next. And Shakespeare. I'll talk a little bit about Shakespeare. In the earliest years, in the 1900s, when it was still operated by the railway, Ravinia Park had the Ben Greet Shakespeare Company come. It was a touring Shakespeare company, often with an orchestra, often New York. And they did things like Midsummer's Night Dream, accompanied by Mendelssohn's music. It was very popular. And you can see these well-held people. You can maybe blow that up a little bit, walking in there. Have to walk over the tracks because if they come in on electric, they have to walk over to the steam tracks. And this is a lower resolution. And again, I'm going to just a little the process when we digitize things, unless they're born digital online, we capture them in a format that's highly stable, in this case called a master TIFF, but they're very large because they're composed of very complex bits and bytes. When we put them on these sites, whether it's the archives online catalog or the digital libraries, we put what's called JPEGs, we put the text in PDF and a little bit smaller. But if people do need, if you need something from anyone, we can really see clearly the type and what it says, we provide people with a high resolution because there's no way that they can be hosted on these sites. And we have these smaller but viewable items on the site, and whatever institution receives the grant for these funds from the state, you are responsible for taking care of and the digital preservation of these masters. So it turns out in the 60s, when we came back from the Depression, there was a group called the Ravinia Association, which was managing Ravinia, funding it. And there's a big debate about whether or not to have Shakespeare again, is it worth it? And they went round and round, their articles everywhere. And they did, and this is a fairly well-known poster. So, and even the New York Times, there was all kinds of hullabaloo going on. And one of the partners we worked with, the Ravinia, someone in the associate had given many records, including correspondence, information about the art programs to the Newberry Library, and they worked with us to digitize it. So we have these letters, especially with Mr. Freeling, talking about how they're developing, what are we going to do? Because a lot of thought about what you present. You bring these stars. At the Japanese conductor with the music director at the time, Ozawi, I hope I pronounced that. I apologize if I'm not. But they did have the Shakespeare, and it was successful, but I think there was so much debate between the board, it kind of lessened its impact somewhat. And that's one thing I know. People are telling me we need more pictures on presentations, and I could read like whole programs and tell you, because I go that opera, that ad, that person. But the correspondence in the collection that Newberry digitized with us and helped us put on the Illinois Digital Archive, this correspondence from Stan Freeling, who of course, he died just 2 years ago, 2019 in Highland Park. He really helped and made Ravinia succeed. And we can see this in his correspondence that's now online, how he's planning and thinking to move forward with Ravinia and make it what it is, and what's going to work, what's going to not. They talk about food, they talk about everything. And and Mr. Freeling also was instrumental in with the Highland Park Historical Society in getting these artifacts preserved and in our collections and encouraging people to donate. So we have the things that we do in our Ravinia collection. And there's some more that I just thoughts and saying, what are we going to do? And what's going to be successful? What's not? The food, is it good? Is it bad? Do we change it? Do we bring in outside vendors? The kind of things that, you talk about in management. So as the years changed, I think I skipped something. I want to just go back to, because it's such a great picture. Did I skip that? Maybe not. I had a picture of the Ravinia China, and I don't see it because they did have, we have in the collection, and thank you probably to Mr. Freeling, I believe, that he donated this Ravinia China that they served at Ravinia, they used to serve in the restaurants in Ravinia. So they started some new programs in the 1960s, art exhibits and sculpture, and it was really encouraged artists. And we have many photos, both in the collections from Highland Park and Ravinia, that talks about the art exhibits and encouraging public art and space and encouraging artists. And it's really quite revealing, I think. And again, you can explore these programs more online, and that's why we did this. But the train case, of course, came in and they built parking lots and changed, and that's nothing Mr. Freeling worked with, I believe. And so this is a map of, again, going back to 1909. If you blow up, look clear at Ravinia, you can see where Vaudeville Theater, where the electric train came in, the baseball stand, the concerts. And so they kind of changed a little bit and added things. And it's a big parking lot. And this was, this is the function of the board, to develop and make sure that this asset, valued asset, is retained and developed and looks forward. And again, that was Mr. Freeling who did that, a lot with the arts and the various endeavors he was involved with and funded. And I want to share this because again, it shows the Historical Society and the city and Ravinia Festival working together. They had a whole bunch of events for the city centennial, and they shared the history. They created a timeline, which is also online. And I've seen different years for 101, 1901, 1902 for purchasing the land, but we know when it opened because it was a very public opening. And so these press releases have also been digitized so people can look at them and kind of put things in perspective for that. And we also, we not just we have some publications like this Edward Gordon profile, and Mr. Gordon was the music director for many, many years. I know I'm going a little longer, but that's a few more minutes. Highland Park, and we have, in toto, we have this program. I'm just going to kind of show you, go back and show you example again. And you can search. The state is still working on this. They had some delays as well. But everything is there. We transferred our Ravinia postcards there, and you can search, by text. You can see that the timeline I spoke about, the various things. But so it's a program before Mr. Gordon retired. And it, sometimes when we have things in folders too, people have clippings like the Orson Welles, and we leave them in there because it really tells us a lot, about what's going on and how the park is developing and what's happening, and the people that put them together that saved these things and gave them to us. And two histories that are also online, I really was happy to share, because I discovered this this paper, and there's one in Newberry, and I've seen it some other places. And this Bennett Singer wrote this at Highland Park High School in 1979. It's not a bad paper at all. It's quite good. And he became a professional writer. And when we're doing this project, you have to think about copyright. Some things are expired. Copyright's different. It's very complex for music, but for manuscripts and photos, you want to be conscious from a certain date and respect them. So I just looked him up, and Mr. Singer's a writer in New York, and he would say, yeah, you can put it up there. So I'm happy we have that. It's a good paper written by a high school kid, complete, and again, available here. If you just put put Singer, you'll see several things. The name's not an uncommon name, but you'll see here his paper. And again, I do all these fun programs that we have now made available. And the site's a little bit slow, but the state's working on it. And it's interesting to see how the music, some of the earliest years are very basic, the standards you play in a youth orchestra, Tannhauser, Mr. Singer's, Dvorak's, and pieces that I love. They're beautiful, they're wonderful, but they get a little more adventurous in different seasons, and they kind of change and evolve to meet the, both artistic, I think, and audience needs. There's always great debates. Janice Joplin was here when the jazz, that awful stuff, of course. And we have some papers that, again, this woman, Melissa Chorman, she did this when she was at Lincoln School. And again, I was concerned because here's some women, I'm not going to put someone's materials online, because you might think you can somebody doing archives 30 years ago, and it's in archives, people will see it, but everyone can see it when it's digitized online. And so I found her on Facebook and contacted her. I said, what do you think? And she was so happy. I wonder whatever happened to that. And so we have a history of a child of Ravinia, but I think it's nice to share that. And and this full text, so you can see there's her little, and it's not scholarly. It's just, it's just kind of one of the fun things that we have here. And she has all these little drawings that she did. And I think there must have been a contest, because there are a couple pictures. I did not hear back from everyone. And so I did not put up anything unless I knew the person. And she read a little park. How did it begin? And, the timeline. I think pretty much everyone here, if you didn't now, and what about the merry-go-round? And so we have these beautiful art from artists that did the covers, professional artists that is well known. We also have the art from the children, and that we're studying the history and local history. So I'm going to kind of segue to Steve so we can talk a little about the program, the work he did at the Steans and the Steans Institute for Young Artists. And so just one thing, it's a brochure from the program, a very important program that they have at Ravinia. But I don't know Jeff Stern, I don't know if you're here, Jeff, or not, but I knew people would ask, so I just thought I would include one from the fire in the 1940s, which devastated Ravinia. Not happy, but they got tents and they had a season that year anyway. And I'm going to hand this over to Steve, but first, Steve Gianni is the video technician for Ravinia Steans Music Institute. He's been working for 30 years.
Excuse me, my father reported the Ravinia fire. We
Oh
lived
my God.
we lived on Delta Road, and my parents were having a dinner party, and a guest looked through our picture window into the park, and she said, "There's a flame over there. What is that?" My father called the Ravinia Fire Department, and we evacuated the house, and the wind blew from the lake to the west. If the wind had blown from the west to the lake, Braeside would have been decimated.
Oh my.
And I saw the flames. I was 5 years old. I was put in a car at the end of Delta Road, at the beginning of Delta Road at Lincolnwood, and I saw the flames high in the sky. Ephraim Goldstein, and he was footnoted in the Daily News report of the Ravinia fire. He reported it.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. We have to talk more. You can stop by the library sometime, maybe. You can talk
Well,
about
I'm living in New York.
well, then I don't think you'll be stopping by the library. But we should talk about this. It's a very interesting story. Let's get rid of Steve. So Steve, he kind of fell into this project when we got this grant, and usually, and it works, when you do digitized archives, you want to describe the collection, survey, know what you have it described and cataloged, and then select, so you can make a choice. Now, we didn't do that because of various reasons. And so Steve got a full basement of stuff and this, that, the other thing, and dug right in. And he worked at the Northbrook Public Library for more than 35 years as managing librarian of the multimedia department. And prior to those positions, he was television producer director in the Chicago area, where he earned an ACE Award for music television programming. During that time, he conducted an interview with Motown legends Martha Reeves and the Vandellas at Ravinia. 1 year later, in a true 15 minutes of fame moment, he was recognized by lead singer Martha Reeves in a crowded lobby of Atlantic Theater where they're performing. And Steve has just done so much work, because instead of taking a collection and sending it off to the vendor, digitizing it and uploading it and doing that, he said to go through and relabel it and find things. And we had a lot of fluidity. We're going to digitize this, we're going to digitize that. No, there were changes, things were available, things weren't available, but he's just done a great job with that. I'm going to show you this one more time, our pages, in really helping to develop what's going to be collections and collaborations between organizations. So thank you, Steve, so much.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. It's been a lot of fun working on this project, mainly because having worked with the Steans Institute for 30 years, just as the video technician, basically what I'm doing is I'm directing all of the programs that happen in the Steans Institute throughout the year, mostly in the summer, of course, a few things in the winter if they had like a special concert or something. But you know, I would direct these videos, take the tape, hand it to the production assistants that were part-time students, and the tape would disappear. I'm assuming it was labeled correctly and put in this nice, you know, archival situation, and learn to find out that that never happened. But what we did find is when we started this project, it was a real discovery for me, because you know, everybody just opened up what they had. Well, here's all the file cabinets that we have, you know, the single copies of programs in. So I'm like, okay, great. So I'm working with Nancy to fill in holes of things that she doesn't have for the Ravinia programs throughout the years, program booklets. The closets is where I found all the videotapes. I didn't even know this closet existed on the 3rd floor of Bennett Gordon Hall. But, you know, I opened it up and I'm like, oh, there's all the tapes and the audio tapes. And they're just a massive pile of videotapes and duplicate tapes, and boxed, not by year, not by any, you know, they were rifled through, and people were looking for things because we'd make copies for the artists and so on and so forth. And then they would just toss them back wherever. So that was the biggest part for me, putting that back together. But it was also very, plus I found out that Ravinia had a basement under one of the buildings, which was very cool. And there's a lot of stuff housed there as well that we were able to find things that we needed. But the programs and the photos were in pretty good condition. The program books were all bound and kept in the publicity department in the main Ravinia building, along with a lot of the photos. So I think we had a pretty good view of that. And some of the photos that were donated later, we're working on digitizing. We got the negatives from the one of the photographers that was hired by Ravinia, but he held the negatives to all the photos that he did. So now we've got those back and we're working slowly to get those digitized. It's a lot of work. Usually these things from the photographers aren't really, they're numbered by a numbering system that they know, but we don't. So it's a lot of guesswork in figuring out what date this was and who these artists or composers or what that evening was all about, but we're working on it. But getting back to the Steans Institute, which is where I've been working all this time, that was an important part of Ravinia, and we're very lucky to have most of the pieces, pretty much all of the pieces of everything that was done there since its inception in 1988. Now there's a difference between the Ravinia Steans Music Institute and it's not really, they talked about children's music and kids being introduced to music at Ravinia. They do that through the Reach, Teach, Play arm of Ravinia, and that's a different set of people that go out to schools all over, a lot in the city as well, and introduce music to children. And they used to bring them to Ravinia when I had first started in like the 90s. They would have children bust in and they'd do their performance there, and the parents would come, and it was a big deal. And we videotaped some of those. However, we don't have those. Those went directly to the schools. And they were for them to duplicate and hand to the parents of the children who were performing on those. But the Ravinia Steans Music Institute is for professional musicians who are on the young side, obviously, some still in college, some past their master's programs and working their way into professional opera, orchestras, solo work. And so we get a lot of fantastic performances here at the Steans Institute. And that's what we've been working on since 1988. I did discover that in 1987, there was master classes under the Steans banner held at Northwestern. So we have those booklets. We don't have any recordings of that, but there were things started back then. But basically, it started in 1988 with an emphasis on piano and strings. Later, they added voice, and then even later, they added jazz. So right now, the Steans Institute is a three-pronged venture where we start out with the Jazz Institute, then it goes to Piano and Strings Institute, then it goes to a Voice Institute. So there's three different disciplines of music, and they're all great fun to watch, great fun to work at. All performances and master classes were recorded. So from 1988 to 2013, we have more than 1,000 VHS, SVHS, and DV-CAM tapes in our possession. And then from 2014 to the present, we have digital files that were recorded, which are on hard drives in our possession and also offsite as well as safety backups. So we're good with that. All tapes were, like I said, found in Bennett Gordon Hall, and it was great finding them. And then luckily we did this during the fall and winter, so I had all the space on the third floor to just kind of spread stuff out across the floors and get them organized by year. But the unfortunate part is labeling on VHS tapes, the labels that came with them, not archival quality. Those labels mostly fell off. So I was very carefully taking stuff out of boxes and taping them back on if I thought this is the one it went to, but then I had to go and check, make sure that was the right information on the outside of the box, or outside of the tape that was actually inside the tape recorded. So there was a lot of viewing and stumbling around, making sure that that was all correct. After that, Nancy helped me with getting archival labeling, and with the help of Ariel at the Institute, I was able to print out newer labels and make everything uniform, and make a permanent collection of video recordings, the original video recordings, that will be housed at the Steans Institute in the library. Luckily, we have a space for that. They've put locking glass doors over the cabinetries so that they are there and will be preserved. The reason we're keeping the originals is the more I talked about digitizing these and was talking to recording engineers and video engineers and even the sound people at Ravinia, 9 times out of 10, the engineers would say, well, you're keeping the originals, right? And I always say, well, we're planning on it, but why? And they would say, well, digital formats can get corrupted, The software that reads the digitized information can go, out of, favor. They don't, we have stuff that was recorded on a Vela. I don't even know what anybody knows what a Vela is anymore, but I can't read those. So I've got this piece of hardware, can't be read. So luckily we had backup SVHS tapes for those. But it is important to keep your original, because as good as digital copies are, they're still copies. Keep the originals. Tape is very stable as long as it's kept in a good environment. So doesn't take up that much room, believe it or not. So we have that all labeled, ready to go, ready to be sent out to be digitized. About a third of them have been so far. I'm working on the DV cams, about to finish up very soon. And then we'll send those out for digitization as well. So we have over 2,500 pieces that have been preserved on these tapes and files, which roughly constitutes about 510 concerts with 1,500 different performers, all represented on these years of videotapes that we have. And we have a massive spreadsheet that has been kept over the years that lists all of the music recorded by title, composer, performer. So I'll be using this to put the metadata into all of the videotaped information that will be, excuse me, let me shut that off. That will be on the Illinois State Archive. Since I was directing the video for most of these performances, I can tell you some of the stellar highlights of things that were happening there. So much of it is fantastic, and you can view some of it actually on Ravinia's website, because it was used in from the Ravinia Archives series this past year when we couldn't have a Steans Institute, so we couldn't be broadcasting or cable casting the information or the concerts that we were doing at the time. So they went back and took some of these performances and actually put them back up on the internet, so people can view some of those just to get a taste of what will be available. But we'll be using all that information for the metadata. So anyway, since I was at most of these, some of the performances, the one that stands out for me was a very surprising 2-piano 4-hand transcription of Stravinsky's Firebird. Just blew us all away. It was one of those performances that as it ended, we forgot to call, fade to black at the end of the tape, just kept rolling because we were all just like commenting on how great it was. So there's a lot of performances like that that will be available now to everybody who wants to take a look at them. The other performances that we did were master classes. Now, some people don't know what a master class is. In a nutshell, basically we had professionals performing at Ravinia, on the main stage or in the Martin Theater, and then they would come to a class at the Steans Institute or teach a class at the Institute to some of the students who would come up on the stage. They would perform part of a piece, and then the musician would come out and say, okay, try it this way. They'd kind of tweak things back and forth and then have them play it a little bit again and then correct them. So pretty much it was a one-on-one class with a luminary professional, and the audience got to sit and watch this happen, and the students benefited from their great tutelage. Some of the people that were in these master classes, that conducted the master classes, were Dame Kiri Takanawa, Frederica von Stade, Yo-Yo Ma, Leon Fleischer, Tokyo String Quartet, Thomas Kwastoff, maestros Christoph Eschenbach, James Conlon, among many, many others. One of my favorite little stories of Frederica von Stade, I believe, was teaching a master class, and the singer was, standing by the piano as they always do, and she reached over and she put her hand on the piano, and the lid, of course, is raised, and she immediately screams, "Stop, stop, stop!" And the singer is like, "Okay, what did I do wrong?" She goes, "You touched the piano." Because you put your hand on the piano, people are now not thinking about the song. They're not enjoying your song at all. They're thinking, when is the lid going to fall and crush your hand? So, these are just some of the little things that they would be imparting wisdom to the singers and the musicians, and just letting them know that there are so many things that go into a great performance, and you don't want to distract from it at all. To complete the collection of Steans Institute information, we have, of course, a complete collection of the yearly program books and the individual programs that were handed out at each of the performances. That will all be digitized as well. And I'm hoping to have those linked to the video performances so that as you're watching, you can possibly download the program booklet for that performance as well, just to make it more convenient. So you won't have to search in two places. So fingers crossed we get this all done. And very happy that this collection will be entirely complete and available worldwide through the Illinois State Library Archive. Yes.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
And thank you for describing the stains. I did not have the right idea of what they are. And now I know. It's wonderful. It's important. So thank you, Patrick Gibson, who is photographer at Ravinia, has posted some links to our SMI from the vault. That's great. Thank you, Patrick. Mr. Lippett said, wow, Orson Welles was local. Yes, he lived in Highland Park as a teenager. I'm just putting up small notes. I wrote up a short article about it a few years ago during his centennial. And he actually wrote for 3 years a column, and he would interview the opera singers who stay in the Maurice. He was living with a man named Maurice Bernstein, who is who ended up being his guardian, and he was kind of like he was at Todd School for Boys in Woodstock. And what I do remember is he was very critical of Gennaro Papi, who is a great conductor, and he ran away with his Mr. Bernstein's daughter. He was 13 or 14 and she was 9, and they were missing for quite some time, but then they came back. So he was quite, we know he's very well known. Does anyone else have any questions? I want to thank Mr. Goldstein for sharing that about the fire. That's a very popular history.
All right, and you hadn't mentioned the appearance of the New York City Ballet in the 50s and 60s. Very important presentation. The New York City Ballet came every summer, and Maria Tallchief danced on that stage. I remember seeing her because I had worked as an usher, and then I was the head ticket taker for the boxes at Ravinia at the Pavilion, and I saw Maria Tallchief dance.
Ooh. Wow. We do have one picture from, I think I mentioned it, from New York City Ballet, and it's post 1964, and I have not gotten copyright clearance to put it online yet, but we hope we will. So yeah, it's very important. Dance is very important to Ravinia. Thank you for reminding us.
I have a question. If in the archives, if anyone had found anything like this in the archives.
Okay, like
it says it's Ravinia 1918.
Okay, I'm trying to find you here.
M.J. Kelm.
Okay. We do have things from 1918. I'm quite sure, I quite know, but I'm going to find you paging through here up here.
This is a ceramic plaque that a friend of mine found at an estate sale.
Oh, now I see. I have seen that image. I've seen that image in 1918.
Because that, the summer of 1918, my father was at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. And as he put it, they took a busload of us boys down to Ravinia. And, it was a lot of entertainment and stuff then, a lot of carnival type stuff. But she knew that my father had been at Ravinia in 1918. And when she saw this at an estate sale, she bought it for me. And so I just wanted to check if it was authentic or for something that somebody made up, later.
I do recognize the artwork from the programs. They would use the same artwork that year on various programs. And they did, we didn't want to talk about everything here, but there was a camp called Gad's Hill, and there were fundraisers held at Ravinia for that, for boys. And so there were busloads of children being taken there for music concerts. And they had other things too. They had a toboggan, they had a merry-go-round. So yes. And
Patrick Gibson stated that we have the magazine cover, but not that beautiful item. I think that's what you were just holding up.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, this is a ceramic plaque. I hang it on my wall. It has a cork backing. And I hang it on.
It was, I think they were used as hot pads, actually.
What?
We have some not from that year, but they did have Ravinia hot pads, to put a trivet to put your hot things on.
Yeah, it is like
Decorate your
a
table.
trivet. Yeah.
I have a poster of Ravinia at 100 years old, Ravinia under the stars. I'm just holding up the camera in my bedroom. That's
Oh,
the Ravinia
yeah.
poster, 100 years.
100 starry years.
Yeah, we have that poster as well, I believe. But yeah, they had competitions. Again, we didn't show everything that we've digitized in ours, but they had at various times competitions to design the posters, and they're marvelous sets, especially in the later half of the 20th century. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Gina wanted to know, how long did it take to rebuild after the fire?
Not long. They did not postpone their concert season whatsoever. They got tents, and they were building by that within several months. They built this new theater. I don't think it was complete 100%, never changing, but they did not postpone the season, and the fire was in May. And there were a lot of articles in the newspaper about it, we got this tent coming, we got this because we have these people coming. So they cleaned up pretty quickly.
The next season, it was the pavilion was built.
Yes.
Only the tent was one season.
Mm-hmm.
So did you watch it burn? Then you said you were 5 years old. That must have been scary.
Absolutely, because as I said, my parents were having a dinner party. My father called the fire department, and we evacuated the house. The firemen came into Delta Road and sprayed the house, and I was put in a car from one of our guests and parked at the corner of Delta Road and Lincolnwood, and I saw the flames shooting up in the sky. And as I said, the wind was coming off the lake, so it blew west. And if it had blown east, Braeside would have been burned to a crisp. And after the fire had been controlled, my parents served coffee to the firemen.
What year was the fire, and what buildings were destroyed?
I believe 1949.
46, I believe. Let's see.
Okay, now we can do the math and know how old he is.
Who, me?
I have a cheat sheet here. 1949, you are correct. May 14th at 9:54 p.m., the wooden pavilion burns down. On June 28th, the season opens as scheduled using a 33-ton canvas tent originally used to hangar B-29 airplanes. The $1 Million Trio of Rubinstein, Heifetz, and Piasecki performed. So there you go. And the new concrete pavilion was built in 1950 at a cost of $350,000 to seat over 3,000, whereas originally they called it as 1,100 for the original seating.
And I've always said that the Chicago Symphony played me to sleep because I was a young kid. I would go to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and Fritz Reiner was conducting, and I could go to sleep with that music.
Wow.
Okay, we have a multi-part question. Is directed to Steve. What is the overall purpose of the digitization effort?
Well, basically, we're digitizing these things to make them available because this is from the grant was from the Illinois State Library. So this is all going to their website eventually, and actually not eventually, it's just as we do it, it's being put on the website, and it'll be available to anybody worldwide, basically, who can goes into their website. But since we have this information and these performances, it's ridiculous to leave them just sitting, in the closet at Ravinia. Let's get them out there to people. Since we have the rights to do so, let's do it. And so, yeah, all the recordings will be available online. And then there's also, they said, commenting on the source of the consistent, excellent graphic design programs. Nance, did you want to take that one?
Well, there's a couple, it varies over more than 100 years. They hired professional Art Deco artists in the early 20th century that did the artwork for the programs. For the posters, they had competitions to create the artwork, and it is beautiful. It's beautiful artwork on itself. There were a couple different ad agencies that come up as doing excellent work. You can look at the back. Some of them are different, but you can see, if you look at the various programs, different organizations were hired to do these programs, and they're usually given recognition on the back or someplace for the artwork.
To the park. I was
Mhm.
born
So-
and raised, I'm 98.
Oh my
I was born
goodness.
and raised about a block from the park. And some of the things that haven't been said about the park is that we used to have the famous circus there in the summertime, and it was fabulous. And then many summers, whether there was an opera there or or anything going on, they played music, and people came from all over with their blankets and their picnics, and used the park as a wonderful place for family to go on the hot days of summer. But I worked there for a number of years on ticket sales and all that kind of thing, but it was a great park and well run.
Well, it's still there. It's still there. And I noticed on the programs, and some of these sadly are not in great shape, but that's where people can look at them instead of having to worry they'll be. It does not tell you who the artist is, but we have information on who the advertising companies they various use. And in fact, some of the correspondence from the 60s I didn't include in the presentation because they're discussing the relative quality. Should we use this guy? Is he good? Is he not? But they really put a high emphasis on beautiful visual arts, and of course Art Deco from the 20s is particularly striking if you look at and coming up to those years. But it varied because there were different associations. The Ravinia Company, there was the Chicago Milwaukee, the Ravinia Association, which has evolved to Ravinia, a different kind of association with the board and not-for-profit that it is current.
Will you be archiving and posting materials from non-performance events at Ravinia, such as the wonderful Best of the Midwest Market, 1990s, I believe, and others?
Well, we're basing on what we have in the collections and what they're finding in Ravinia. And the ultimate goal is to describe everything in the collection and digitize a lot of it. But that's the ultimate goal is Ravinia Archives collaborations to preserve and provide access to the history. And I've not seen anything and stuff. We have Best of Midwest Market, but it could pop up, and certainly that would be made available if it was in the collections.
Right. Especially,
You know what, that collection would very likely be like, well, Abby Mandel, who's gone to heaven, but the Green City Market, a lot of the people that founded the Green City Market were behind the Best of the Midwest Market.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't spearheaded at Ravinia, it wouldn't be in our archives. If they were using, Ravinia property for, another event, we may not have that information. We might have ads that it was happening, but we wouldn't.
And materials can be different places. What we found that things get scattered. It might be an architect. Ravinia was just working with a young author on his dissertation, and he had found drawings at a college special collections of the architecture drawings, and someone who's involved with the Midwest Market might have given them to another special collection. So it sometimes does depend where it lands, who owns it, who creates it, where some of these materials end up. And we're always trying to be proactive and seek them out and see if they're out there to get them in the archive so people can use them and research them.
I live in New York, so I haven't been up to date on presentations at Ravinia. Have rock concerts ever been presented at Ravinia?
Oh, absolutely.
I could tell you my favorite thing I found in the archive that I can't digitize. It's going through the file cabinets in the basement, and I found a contract that was signed Robert Zimmerman, if you can guess who that is.
Bob Dylan.
Yeah. So yeah, there were a lot of rock concerts at Ravinia and continue to be. But those, of course, aren't videotaped because, of rights issues and whatever. But they will, of course, be in the program books and things that are digitized, announcements of these concerts. And if there are any photographs taken by the Ravinia photographer, they would be put in there as well.
I'm going to read Patrick Gibson's because I think he has a good thing to say about getting some oral histories. But Steve and I talked about this earlier about recordings. we are not aware, and Ravinia is not aware of extant recordings, which most inevitably were made of early Ravinia performances. And if of course, if they did, they preserve them and make them available and digitize them. But that is something that people want to be on the lookout for. And Ravinia is looking forward to maybe people finding them, because it'd be great finds. And copyright sometimes issue too. And as far as rock concerts, now Janice Joplin was at Ravinia in the 60s, and there were in the collection at the Historical Society, there's letters to the editor, just people, oh my gosh, it's just, we're supposed to be high class, jazz rock. So, and now they have actually quite an interesting mix when they're open at Ravinia. So I'm going to read this. Patrick Gibson is the current photographer at Ravinia, and he's saying, I'm hearing so many amazing stories from neighbors and would love to interview anyone interested to get these stories on tape. Feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in sharing your stories, pgibson@ravinia.org. And if anyone contacts me, I'll provide them with Patrick's email. And I'm sure if he would love to have, if you find something like an old wax cylinder of an opera at Ravinia, he would want to hear about that too, to say build their archives.
When they played Ravel's Bolero, they had real canyon shooting off. I remember those cannons they brought in. It was something else to watch. I just thought I'd have to throw that in.
Oh, that's great. So, Stravinsky actually conducted too at Ravinia as well.
Would you be interested in a little vignette that has always made me smile? There was a performance at which Mahler's Eighth was to be performed, and the conductor was ill.
Yeah.
And they had to hire a new conductor at the spur of the moment. And I guess an agent came up with this young kid named James Levine. And the story went that he had this conversation with Ed Gordon, who said, do you really feel competent to conduct this great symphony? And apparently the response was, would it make you feel any better, Mr. Gordon, if I tell you that I plan to do it without a score?
Thank you for sharing that. Very interesting.
Benny Goodman also had a wonderful program there that I can remember going to, and it really he had that park pretty well covered with people. I'll tell you, he did a great job.
And he was local too, so he played with some trumpeter from Highland Park. I had someone just share a scrapbook trying to help ID this local band, which was Benny Goodman and a young trumpeter from Highland Park High School. So it was local.
Do you know anything about what I've heard, that there has to be a certain number of classical concerts every year, and if they're not a certain number, Ravinia reverts back to the previous owner?
Now that there was a contract to that effect many, many years ago. It was Mrs. It was the widow of one of the major funders, and I'm going to look at right now. And there was talk that Mrs. Eckstein, when she deeded it, she said if I recall correctly, it's music of proper quality. So there was that kind of implication, but that's long expired, and that's not going to ever happen. And it wasn't written like classical or music by these composers or music in this period. It was good music, which of course is subjective. But there was a clause, a discussion that she wasn't going to give it the land, Mrs. Eckstein. Of course, we didn't want to cover the whole Ravinia history. We just want to introduce you, and we have these histories online now. But we don't want to become the Coney Island of the Midwest. That was kind of the phrase that was being heard, that as when the first receivership, when the North Shore people came together and bought it, they were afraid of bringing the wrong kind of people to their park. So that is true. There was a clause in the 30s.
How often has Ravinia not been open for a season, like last year? I think once before, maybe.
There's a year, I believe it was 1909, where it was limited, but they had some events there, and it was 32 through 35 when there was no performances in the Depression, before when the Ravinia Company folded, and then the Ravinia Association with the donations and primarily with the money from the Ecksteins, was reestablished and reopened.
Because I think this last year, we kind of recognized, maybe more than ever before, what the economic and social impact of Ravinia not being present. It had a lot of effect, and I'm very glad it's been able to return too.
Well, we lived in Highland Park, and Ravinia was an extraordinary source of our amusement, and our life revolved around Ravinia Park. And the music programs were great.
I'm curious, what was the source of the Eckstein money?
You know, I don't recall. I can look that. He was very wealthy, and it was. Let me look. I can't answer that. I can take you. Who is that asking that? Because I will find that out and I will email you to find that. Is it Mr. Lippitz or Mr. Goldstein?
No, Michael Goldstein. Yeah.
I will find that out, and I don't recall at this point, but I know I've seen it in the programs, referring back to where he worked, and I will find that for you.
Okay. And I took your phone number. I will call you at the library.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I had a question, probably for Steve, on what you're looking for archives. This is a tape recording of Ravinia concert in 1984. And I have my husband, who has passed, this lovely wooden box, live from Ravinia, had a number of these tape recordings from the past in it. Is that the kind of thing that you're interested in or not?
Those were probably commercially available. So, or something that if it was say someone that was one of the fellows at the Steans Institute, they could order tapes of their performance. So it could be one of those. But if it's something like, James Levine conducted a set of albums that was Music from Ravinia was the title of it. And those are, of course, commercially held and not available to us to archive because obviously I think they were on RCA. So they have
this just says Side A, 1984, Volume 2. There's nothing commercial on it.
Yeah, I wonder if that's like a home recording someone made with their when they were at it.
No, this live from Ravinia.
Does it say who's performing?
Yeah, well, these are from 1984. It does. James Levine, piano. And then, yes, it does list performers. Young Kim doing Mozart, and it lists all the performers on this thing.
Yeah, that might be from the album set that RCA put out of Levine's conducting recordings that were taped live at Ravinia, or called Music from Ravinia.
It does look like a holdout from an album.
Yeah.
Program notes from program notes are from like Volume 1, Side A.
Right. So
refers to these.
That's published. Generally, that would be published material.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that would be irrelevant for what you're looking for.
Not irrelevant, but really what archives look for when they're doing actively collecting are unique and primary materials. And sometimes it might be something that was printed like a wax cylinder, but mostly primary materials are really what they're looking for. And with music, with the many layers of copyright, it opens up a whole new, it belongs to whoever created it.
Yeah, I can see how that would be.
Yeah, it might say on the bottom of that book too, any copyright information or what company produced it, somewhere probably in very fine print.
How long do you think this process of this archiving is going to take, digitization?
Well, with what we're doing right now, it'll be at least another year before everything's up and complete. As far as the archives project, creating for Ravinia, I think ultimately it's going to be an ongoing project if the program, and I think it will be, that you have and archives. You have a place for people to research, you have people to preserve it. So that's something that really is a living entity of preserving the materials and the culture of Ravinia. But as far as putting the stuff from this money, from this IDA, I envision it another year at least before everything is absolutely up. And we have to wait for the state too, to with some things as well.
Yeah, this is all from Ravinia. There isn't any other publisher or anything listed.
Are you in Highland Park?
Yeah, I live right
Well,
up.
maybe you can contact us and I can get you in contact with Steve and Patrick and look and see if this is something primary that's not available elsewhere. And we can talk about that.
Okay.
You can call me at the library and I can. Ravinia, and this is Steve and Patrick, it says, I'm ultimately, are you actively looking for photograph submissions taken by attendees over the years? Just curious. I don't know that they have their collection policy completely formulated, but I will let them answer that. Are you going out and getting things right now like that? Or
Yeah, I think that would be a question for Patrick. I think anything historic, he says, we'd love to see.
because it's always, you can always ask, it may be the answers, and that's in general for archives. It may be like, oh, we already have that. No, that's not what we're looking for. That's not what we collect, but it never hurts. You might have something that is very interesting to everybody and valuable in the long-term future. So you should ask. Okay, I understand the payment thing, Patrick. Yeah. Patrick's got a new one too, so.
Yeah, I'd say, again, a lot of things, especially of a unique and unusual nature, and the age has a lot to do with it too. I mean, everybody, of course, has their cell phone pictures that they've taken since those have come out for concerts at Ravinia. But, if somebody's like father or mother back in the day has a picture that they snapped of, Benny Goodman performing or Gershwin performing at Ravinia, yeah, why not? Let's take a look at it. Or like you said, live recordings that were done. You never know what you're going to run across. And it's certainly worth looking into.
Have you thought about doing, the things that you've shown us, the pictures, et cetera, and some of the documents are very interesting. Have you thought about doing an exhibit in the exhibit space during the summer? At the park?
At the park, we would certainly assist with that. We did an exhibit at the old museum, the Highland Park Historical Society, 2000, when was that? 2014, we had an exhibit, and then there was a one before then. There's been several, so, but for Ravinia, I can't answer that.
But now they have a space at the park.
Oh, well, maybe that's
the space underneath the eating bar is for exhibits. I mean, the outdoor, eating thing where you go up the steps and underneath there is exhibit space.
Right. Oh, you're talking, those are for curated exhibits that Ravinia is posting. It just opened like a year or two ago.
Right.
Yeah. I feel horrible. I can't remember the name of it.
I can't either.
Yeah, but I work there. It's a beautiful, it's like a small museum space. And they started out with Bernstein.
Bernstein. That's, I was trying to remember.
Really
right.
Cool. It was a great exhibit. Yeah, those are curated exhibits that they're doing. And I'm sure there's someone at Ravinia, if you had, ideas or something in mind, there's a person there that is running that museum aspect of it. And but yeah, those are definitely curated programs.
The things that you had tonight would be appropriate for an exhibit there, I think.
We're hoping one of these days to get something big enough that would be really cool.
Is it possible it was called Ravinia Music Box?
Yes, thank you.
It's somebody who typed in.
Yeah, probably my boss.
Outsourcing is a big thing that's very helpful to us many times, to archivists and librarians and musicians.
Yes, that was from an employee. Thank you, Hina.
Well, never mind then.
Anyway,
It looks like we've exhausted the conversation, or it could go on forever, which is
right,
I would have a question. The
Okay.
Chicago Symphony played at at Ravinia every summer. How did it finance it? I mean, did Ravinia pay to have the symphony, or did the symphony rent the space? What was the relationship?
It's interesting that you should ask that question, because the answer is it varied. There are contracts, there were contracts, there's always contracts. In fact, I came across a contract, there's actually a contract online for 1 year. It depended on the contract and the year, and it changed depending on the circumstances. And it's something, it involves unions and contracts, and it's not the same from year to year. And I don't know what it is now, but I do know I came across a contract in the 60s for that is online in the digital archive.
I think it's quite well understood that the rock concerts help to support the classical music that we love so much. That's a lot of the funding comes from the rock concerts, which have huge crowds and was a major problem at one time in that area.
Regarding the rock concerts, you refer to Janice Joplin. That was actually in July of 1970.
Oh.
And I was actually there. It was a full house. It was an outstanding concert. She was on the stage pretty much nonstop for almost 2 hours. Just an incredible concert, but it also created problems, and there was a lot of objection to having any further rock concerts at Ravinia after that, because they didn't like, that type of attendee going through Highland Park and all that went with it. But she was a standout on that one and only concert.
Right, and in fact, the mayor at the time, Geraci, who's recently passed away, he was trying to find a way to ban rock concerts, and at that time, Highland Park was still dry, so that also presented some quandaries.
Yes, and she was
By
drinking.
dry, Highland Park did not allow alcohol sales till 72, I believe. So, although
At least, and she, of course, was known for her drinking. Added to her concert, it was great, though. Thank you for your work today, both of you.
thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Okay,
Good night.
Thank you. This was wonderful.